I am convinced that the alliance is just as important or more important today than it was when the treaty was signed in Washington in 1949.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, fire!
On a rainy day in Germany last week, British troops stood to attention for the West German President, Dr. Heinrich Lübke. The date was significant, August the 4th, the 52nd anniversary of Britain's declaration of war on Germany in 1914. And so was the place, the Lüneburg Heath, where Germany surrendered at the end of the Second World War. But this visit had a special point. It came at a time when Britain, fighting for her economic life, is earnestly considering a major withdrawal of Rhine Army troops. President Lübke, like the Queen, is above politics, and during his visit to the 3rd Royal Tank Regiment, the question of a British withdrawal was probably never mentioned. But it must have been in the minds of many of the top brass who sat beside him, watching the Centurions trundle past. It costs Britain £200 million a year to keep 60,000 men in West Germany, and 90 million of it has to be paid in Deutschmarks. Of that 90 million, Germany has been paying up to a half. This year, Britain, desperately short of foreign exchange, has been pressing the Germans to pay the whole 90 million. But the Germans have financial problems too, and they've offered only 1/3. Britain says that unless the Germans can do better, she'll have to economize by pulling out some troops, perhaps as many as 15,000. Even now, economy is the watchword. An exercise like this is a luxury. Any major withdrawal would have far-reaching implications for us and NATO. Britain hasn't got accommodation for the Rhine Army men, their families and their equipment. It might mean cutting the overall strength of our army. And for NATO, it might mean dropping the forward defense policy. Senior officers say that without British troops, Germany couldn't be defended right up to the east-west border. Faced with these problems, British military planners have been looking at Rhine Army costs. Where do all these Deutschmarks go to? The biggest single item, £34 million, is the pay of German civilians employed by the British forces. There are 43,000 of them, and by far the largest group, 35,000, work for the army. This Rhine workshop, the biggest operated by the British Army anywhere in the world, employs 1,800 Germans and only 40 Britons. It looks like a German factory. In fact, it was one until the British took it over in 1945 as part of their war reparations. To employ German civilians costs foreign currency, but the army claims it's cheaper than using soldiers as the Americans do. It cuts down the non-fighting tail, leaving more troops for combat duties. And unlike soldiers, civilians do not need costly living quarters for themselves and their families. It takes 7 weeks to overhaul a Centurion tank and costs £10,000. The cost of a new tank is £45,000. This workshop refits 150 a year, many of them virtual write-offs. The Army claims that this saves the British taxpayer £2.5 million a year. After a tank is stripped, it is dipped in a bath of caustic soda to remove all the paint and rust. Then it's ready for the refit. At the end of their 7-week overhaul, the renovated tanks, shiny with new paint, move off the assembly line at the rate of 1 every 2 days. Finally, they're taken onto the test track and put through exhaustive trials by a German, a former panzer driver. German civilians' pay accounts for well over 1/3 of Britain's Deutschmark expenditure on the forces in Germany. The next biggest single item, £27.5 million, is the money spent by British troops and their wives in Germany. 20 million of it goes in the NAFI, where 40% of the goods are of foreign origin. If a soldier buys a radio, a television set, or a camera, it will almost certainly be German or Japanese. Senior officers in the Rhine Army, deeply concerned at the possibility of big cuts in their forces, urge an all-out Buy British campaign to staunch the Deutschmark drain. They point to the American forces, who import all their fuel and 90% of their food from the United States. Britain couldn't hope to do the same, since she has to import all her fuel, most of her food, and all her wine. But the critics say that instead of buying foreign because it's cheaper, NAFI ought to buy British even if the price is slightly higher. 2/3 of all cars sold through NAFI are of foreign make. One reason: foreign makers give discounts, British ones don't. But it's the expenditure on German civilians which has prompted the German press to accuse the British of living too well, attended by an army of German servants. The British angrily deny this and retort that in booming Germany, a British officer is lucky to have 1/3 of a battalion. In the German-built spaciousness of Rhine Army headquarters, a colonel's wife usually washes her own dishes. The weakness of the British pound is only one of the pressing problems that faced General Lyman Lemnitzer, on the right, NATO's commander in Europe. In the last few weeks, General Lemnitzer has had to cope with General de Gaulle's withdrawal of France from the military side of the NATO alliance and rising pressure in America itself for a reduction of United States troops in Europe. France's exit from NATO took place at the beginning of July. General Lemnitzer has until next April to complete the withdrawal of 70,000 American servicemen and their families from France, as well as nearly 1 million tons of stores. He also has to move his own supreme headquarters, plus a second headquarters, Allied Forces Central Europe, from French soil, at a total cost of well over £100 million. NATO's commitment in France, only a glimpse of which is visible at Shape itself, is gigantic. It includes 46 airfields, 100 signal stations, and 3 underground war headquarters, the whole lot worth nearly £300 million. Shape is the nerve centre. I asked General Lemnitzer about the problems of moving his headquarters.
In the first place, it has to be carried out in as smooth and effective and economical manner as possible. And overriding all other considerations, we cannot for a moment lose command and control over the forces that are controlled by these 2 important headquarters. In the case of Shape, the forces extend from the northern tip of Norway to eastern Turkey, a distance of some 3,600 miles. In the maintenance of continuous command and control throughout that entire area during the transition is a vital consideration that must be accomplished.
Shape Peace Terminal. In plain language, it means war room. Behind this carefully guarded door, the coded secrets of NATO flow in a steady stream from a bank of teleprinters. Much of the traffic these days concerns the possible new sites for SHAPE in Belgium. In SHAPE's war rooms, everything is secret, even the waste paper. The United States has 26,000 troops in France, with twice as many dependents. All of them are under General de Gaulle's notice to quit. Evra in Normandy is a typical United States Air Force base. Some of its personnel are being moved to RAF Mildenhall in Suffolk, others to the United States. Because of the Vietnam War, America has already withdrawn some of its best troops from Europe. Only a few days ago, Senator Mike Mansfield, the Democratic leader in the Senate, demanded that all American personnel in France should be returned to America. He also urged the American forces in the whole of Europe should be cut by a further 10%. And so, despite the American government's denials, it's generally expected that American manpower in Europe will be reduced in the near future. As some of his countrymen depart, General Lemnitzer stresses the continuing need for NATO.
I am convinced that the alliance is just as important or more important today than it was when the treaty was signed in Washington in 1949. The enemy, potential enemy capability is greater today than it was in 1949. No one but the enemy knows what his intentions are, and the intentions can be changed overnight. However, his military capabilities today are enormous.
Not so enormous are Britain's capabilities. British nuclear strength in Germany is being reduced. The artillery regiments armed with Corporal missiles are being taken out of service. So are the Canberra bombers assigned to a tactical nuclear role. This means that in war, British troops would be without immediate British aerial nuclear support. On the ground, too, they would have to rely on the West Germans' superior nuclear artillery. All that Rhine Army has in its nuclear armory is 2 regiments of Honest Johns, which only have a range of 25 miles.
Ready for angle!
Hampered by the expense even of these mini-missiles, each costs £9,000, the British Army can only manage 3 weeks a year for live practice.
20 seconds. 15. 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Fire!
Now the French have withdrawn from NATO, the Germans, with their 700 starfighters, have a role second only to the Americans. They've got 12 divisions in NATO, compared to Britain's 2.5. And in the air, they're vastly superior too. Throughout Germany, the starfighter pilots are always on alert for interception or nuclear attack.
We will fly all our missions under close control from GCI. All missions will be flown single, and we will be put to 5 minutes on notice of GCI. And we are going to have targets probably flying in from a northeasterly heading.
Despite their string of crashes, 61 to date, the West German starfighters are a major part of NATO's frontline capability in the air.
Keine 9 haben wir gesagt, ne? Keine 9 haben wir gesagt.
Verhaftet.
Ach, kann ich keine 16
Aha. Shit. Los, fährt rein, ist meiner.
Attention, grade 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7.
If Britain has to withdraw troops, there will be one inevitable result. British influence in NATO will decline and West Germany's will grow. At the moment, no British forces take orders from Germans in the field, but any major cuts in British forces now would almost certainly bring them under German command in a war situation. Not that the pilots of the von Richthofen squadron, named after the First World War fighter ace, particularly want this to happen, but if it did, for the first time in history, German airmen could be giving orders to British pilots.